You know, when I first agreed to be on the panel, I thought it'd be simple. Just enjoy a good lunch in good company. I didn't realize I had to like be the anchor man on Roundup. But Bante, Dr. Wallace, Prof Kua, Dr. Marshall, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do is try to put a little bit of what you've heard this morning together, but perhaps to approach it from three parts. I'm part anatomist, I'm part embryologist, I'm part psychotherapist. Now, for the last 30 weeks, we've been a group of us, including Professor Mooney Winslow, Mr. Wee Sinto, Professor Goli Gan. We've been meeting together to talk about these things, not in such great depth. And I was just thinking in the last 30 weeks, I met two people. Dr. Wallace has like spent 30 years deep in this sort of a thing with consciousness. And there was a Sir Michael Rutter who came about 2-3 months ago, and he spent like 30 years or more with resilience. So here I am, you know, trying to follow two powerful speakers, helping to fight the effects of lunch and going into something tough like, you know, the brain. But I thought, well, I do two things. One is I put on a tie, then at least there's something you can look at. The other thing is I'm going to stand over here and maybe try to use some images to just tell you a little bit about how we're thinking and how we can try and coincide with what you said. All the errors are mine, okay? But all the original thoughts belong to this group that I meet with every Tuesday. Thank you. If you cannot hear me at the back, could you just please raise your hand or something? Otherwise, I'm going to stand here. And Miss Jasmine Tan is going to help me with it. Okay, thank you. What I'm trying to do is I'm breaking up this title because I'm trying to stimulate various parts of your mind. For example, if you look at something like this, where there's an EN over here, and there's also an EN over here. To you, you think there are similar parts of your mind that's being activated. Actually, it's not true. It isn't, because your mind doesn't even see EN as a word. This is actually just art to the mind. It's just seeing lines and diagonals and black and white and so on. And if you look at the other one, the one with the SE, there are a few ES over here. There are 3 of them over here. Again, they might look similar to you, but I'm actually activating different parts of your mind. Okay, thank you. Now, I was thinking, if someone is facing a time of, you know, where they need to be adaptable and flexible and so on, perhaps what they need to do is, in a sense, face reality, face facts, face the present moment, and in situations like a crisis, and they will need to take action. They probably need some boldness or courage, and they probably should train themselves before they actually enter that period of crisis. Okay. So, you see, if most of you, when you face reality, you figure one of the toughest things is to deal with the feelings, right? Whether it's fear, anxiety, depression, a fear of an unknown, as it were. There's physical action. Certainly, you need to concentrate all your faculties together. In this day and age, thinking is very important. And of course, we have our own values, our own motives. I've just put the word spirit there. It's not religious, I think. It's just whatever drives you. Yesterday, I learned a new word from Dr. Wallace, metacognition. Yeah, I knew about cognation. I didn't know there was a metacognition. Okay, you can ask him about that afterwards if you like. Thank you. So I thought, what about we ourselves as individuals? Maybe there are parts of us that, you know, could fit something like this. So if you think about it, you certainly have a physical body. You have an intellectual part, you certainly have an emotional part, and presumably there's a part where we store our values and so on. And what brings all this together is, thank you, the consciousness to, thank you very much. Yes. Now I'm going to learn how to use this. Okay. Go ahead, Jasmine. The consciousness that we have, the ability to recognize things not only outside us but inside us, perhaps that helps us to, in that area of grey, to put things together. But one of the problems we have is we overstep it and then put things into black and white. I suspect that's where you brought in the president's example. I'm just using this circle to say maybe when we face with the situation, we might put it into, say, things that we know and things that we don't know. But I'm changing it a little bit to say it could also be sort of representative of you as a person. Others know something about you, and of course you know things about yourself that the others don't know about. And there's a part of us that others know about us that we don't know about ourselves. And then there's that hidden self. Thank you. And I just thought we'd have fun and watch it rotate for a little while. But this is to illustrate that things are changing, as Alan said. Not only are circumstances around us changing, but we are changing. I've always been interested in growth, growth, physical growth, embryo, developmental, ontological, and so on, but also growth of the mind. And so I thought if you took those 4 parts and tried to put it together, I can actually tell you we have an intellectual brain, at least a part of the brain. And there's a physical part that controls our movements and so on. And certainly there's an emotional part of the brain. I can't tell you where the rest of it is, that self thing. That's the mind. So I simply put it as self there. By the way, I changed this after we talked yesterday. So I put in some of the words that we actually talked about. Thank you. You see, this is the misconception that most people have, where they think anything that affects us goes straight to our thinking center and so on. Thank you. Not true. You see, we forget that we actually have an emotional brain. Thank you. And this is actually what's happening in us. Anything that affects us goes through an emotional part. It's not the middle level of the brain before it actually reaches the higher level of consciousness, our awareness of what is happening. But we forget that. And I'll try and illustrate that to you. So, you see that part that's pink over there? If I touch that part, go ahead. Now I'm going to plunge you into anatomy for a little while. This is what I show my students. The yellow bit is the nerves thing. And basically I'm just showing sort of, can you see the little black dot that goes? Those are just transmission of nerve impulses. They're basically just electrical wires, if you like. Thank you. The one going to the brain is the sensory part, and the one coming down is the motor part, the part that makes us work and so on. I'm going to enlarge it. You see, this is the thing, you see. Most people think that the nerve goes straight up to the top. Not true. There's at least 2 other nerves in between. To use technical jargon, this is the first order, second order, and third order neurons. I just want to point out, you see, it goes through this second part. And can you see that word thalamus there? Okay, I'll show that to you. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. That's the thalamus, that red bit. Can you click off the blue one again, Jasmine? You see, that's the thalamus. That's the midbrain, that second order bit. This is what anatomists know as the basal nuclei. These are the deep nuclei. Look, most of you in high school, you learn that the brain has grey matter on the outside, white matter on the inside, and then the spinal cord has white matter on the inside, grey matter on the outside. Not true. It's not possible. How can you have something grey on the outside, the brain, and then suddenly it goes into the center? Physically, the brain cannot be linked to the spinal cord, and yet suddenly you have grey on the outside, become grey on the inside. What they didn't tell you is, in the brain, we have grey matter, white matter, and grey matter. Whereas in the spinal cord, you just have white matter and grey matter. In other words, in the brain, there is that original deep group of nuclei. That's the limbic system. Right? That's actually what some of you know as the reptilian brain. Thank you. Go ahead, Jasmine. Now, I've just sort of done it up a bit, and I've replaced the self with the mind because I know nothing about the mind, so it's up to Alan to explain to you. But see, this is the bit. This is what I showed you earlier on, right? That whatever you are affected by goes through that emotional part, the limbic system. Go ahead. This is the problem, you see. By the time some impulse comes, and before it reaches your consciousness, your emotional brain might have kicked in. You might have slapped the guy or road rage or whatever before you even are aware of it. Think of it, if somebody steps on your foot, right? If it's a child, you might withhold the thing. If it's somebody else, you might just slap, right? If it's a friend, you might hug him or something, I don't know. But this is a problem. Here is one possible solution. Now here I'm really going way out of my depth, okay? Yeah. What if, you follow it, right? There's an impulse coming in. You could actually train this part, which initially goes there, to take some circuit around. So that by the time it comes back, that intellectual part has had enough time to take over it. I suspect that's part of the answer about this thing. And I've just used one word, intention. Alan has talked about things like awareness, attention, and so on and so forth. I think that's part of the value of that mindfulness, that attention to the present moment. I bet you none of us like to live in the present moment because it takes a lot of energy. One of the things I do is I never remember things. Why? Because I know my brain uses up a lot of glucose just to hold things. So I write things down. That's the beauty of being an anatomist, you see. Yeah. Did you know that glucose is used by the muscles and the brain, and yet the muscles don't use glucose? Instead, it uses glycogen, because glycogen is stored glucose in the... It takes extra effort to break down the glycogen, but the muscles don't use the glycogen. Why? Because the glucose is being reserved for the brain. Now you know why I try not to think too much. Just too much energy. So I've broken it up in a way, and I've tried to put in words, because after talking to Jonathan and to Alan, you realize they have actually covered some of these. I put them into a mind. Now, if you ask me where the mind is, I can't tell you. Because to me, the brain is a physical product. It's an organ like the kidney or the heart. The mind is not a physical organ or product. It's a process involving various parts of the mind, perhaps, of the brain. So, but go ahead, just one. What I can show you, though, is where the mind is linked to the intellectual part of the brain. We're pretty sure there is that connection there. That's known as the prefrontal cortex. You see the brain? This is the front part. This part here, that's where they are now focusing things like fMRI and so on and so forth. Because, remember I showed you all those words at the beginning and so on? This is the part that eventually is putting all those words together to make some meaning. That that there's a connection between resilience and consciousness and mindfulness and so on. I've purposely put this busy diagram in just to make you realize, you see, normally that green part is the part people think that makes us talk, speak. But actually, even before we do that, there are at least 3 other parts that are sending signals to each other, telling us what to talk and so on. That's what's going on in your mind. It's not just one particular area of the brain that's involved. It's a lot of parts of the brain being integrated. That's the attention, that's the intention, I think. Okay, so this is just another way to show you. I've taken the nerves out. See, same thing. Whether it goes to brain directly or to spinal cord, it always goes through the thalamus. That's the emotional brain. Okay, finally. Thank you, Jasmine. One more. Now I need to walk over here, but you can keep looking at the screen. I'm sorry, I'm too dumb to use this one, so. Okay. Thank you, Jasmine. I'm just going to take you a painless way through into the thorax, okay? And this is what we do. I won't take you in because you haven't paid me enough to teach you anatomy. But basically you could remove all these things and so on and so forth. What I want to do is, just remove that. That's the right lung. So now this is the part where the heart is. That's the left lung. This is the one I want you to focus on for the next minute or so. This is the diaphragm. This is a muscle. Even though it's a muscle in us, it's not an involuntary muscle. It is a muscle under our voluntary control. In other words, you can control it. Just like the biceps, or whatever other muscle on the outside. So, I'm just going to switch to this last diagram that shows a view from the side. You see, what I've done is I've actually got you into one stage of awareness. you're thinking about that muscle in you. So that's one awareness. If and of course, I'm making it breathe, so hopefully you're breathing too. Let me try and switch you a little higher to attention, right? Can you just think about your own breathing for the moment? As you breathe in, as you breathe out. This is a slightly different form of awareness. Because just now you just say, yeah, my diaphragm moves. But now you're following it. Is it contracting or is it relaxing? Third one, just for the moment, those of you who haven't fallen asleep, right? You want to try with me. Take a deep breath and hold it. You see, by holding it, you started the intention to hold it. Yes? You can let go now. What I'm pointing out is, you had an intention to the attention. In other words, you are paying attention to your diaphragm. As it moved down, you were saying, okay, at some point, at the lowest point, I need to stop it. That's the intention. Are we okay so far? Last word. Metacognition. I don't know how to explain this. I'm going to make it even worse for you. Attention to intention. So it's actually like a very cyclic sort of thing, right? First, you pay attention to the diaphragm. Then you pay intention to pay attention. Now I'm asking you to pay attention to intention. How? Last round I'm going to try for you. I brought a set of bells, which I do use once in a while, right? Here, just try it out with me. When I ring this, will you just sort of, you can close your eyes, you can look at me, it doesn't matter. Take a deep breath, okay? Now, I'm going to do something unusual, which is not what you do in meditation. You hold it until I ring the bell again. Okay? That would be your attention to intention. Are we okay? Ready? First one, you take a breath in, okay? I'm just waiting for you all to gasp or something. You see, you had to pay an enormous amount of attention to keep it there. That was the attention to intention. And so most times that's what we call metacognition. Okay. Thank you very much.